We are here with Danijela Dolenec, which is Deputy Mayor of Zagreb and the Vice Chair of the Eurocities Social Affairs Forum. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yeah.
I would like to ask you regarding poverty, why is prevention essential rather than alleviating the symptoms or trying to tackle the consequences of poverty in cities?
Okay, so there are two ways to answer this question. One focuses on many research findings which show that early intervention really has much more success in alleviating initially children and then young people and adults out of poverty. So if we intervene early on through an integrated approach, educational, social, health, and so on, we are able to improve material conditions, increase aspirations, and so there are many good outcomes that come later on. So in terms of what the science shows is that early intervention is much more effective than later on. A second, more pragmatic way to deal with prevention is to say that it actually costs less, governments pay less if they have strong prevention programs rather than trying to intervene once cities already suffer with high rates of poverty, segregation, and so on.
And prevention focuses in childhood mainly, and this is very important because when we tackle poverty at early stages, we are trying to break the generational cycle of poverty. And how can we do this? Through investing in children, but also investing in high quality education.
Education is extremely important in addressing inequalities that come from family backgrounds. We know this again from a lot of existing research, and the earlier we start, again, the better the outcomes later on. That's why, for instance, kindergartens and good quality public kindergarten system is shown to have really long-term effects on children. For instance, studies show that the biggest changes to educational attainment later on is for children who are from families of disadvantaged background. To put it another way, kids from well-off families will do good, irrespective of whether they attended a kindergarten. But children from disadvantaged families really have very high, much better impact later on. And that's why it's one of the, I would say, most transformative, most emancipatory policies that governments can implement. A good quality early childhood care and education system.
But poverty also impacts adults, of course. And I'd like to ask you what strategies can ensure that housing remains affordable and accessible? Because as you know, nowadays there is the housing crisis in Europe and mainly in cities. So I think this may be very important to tackle poverty.
Absolutely. This is across the board, I would say, across Europe, large and small cities facing the affordability crisis in housing. The good news, so to speak, is to say that I think there is now a much wider political consensus that this is a priority. We see it both left, center, and right-wing governments aware of this problem. European institutions more aware of this program. We're all looking for ways to finance it. So I think we're now in the crux of figuring out ways in which we can build enough housing to make it affordable and indeed to influence affordability of cities more generally.
Apart from housing, how can income and employment policies be designed to protect people from falling into poverty? Because before, work and income were protecting employees and people, but now with the rising cost of living in cities, this is becoming more difficult.
Yes, and I think when we speak about levels of income and job security and so on, here we're on a territory where cities cannot break this cycle of poverty and insecurity on their own, because these are necessarily, labor market policies necessarily have to be nationwide and Europe-wide. But what I think that, again, where cities really make a difference is in the high risk of poverty, vulnerable groups. We need to have programs which also focus on cash subsidies and so on to lift people out of dire poverty. But it's more important actually to, again, provide high quality service. So early childhood care and education, affordable or free education, primary, affordable or free primary health system. These are services which, of course, impact the quality of life and help people who are in insecure job conditions. I would say Europe today, because of geopolitical concerns, because of multipolarity and other issues that Europe is facing, maybe it isn't giving enough priority to questions such as risk of poverty. And this network is one of the key levers that we have on a European level.
As you said, it's very important to have actually the voice of cities taken into consideration. And now that the European Commission will launch the anti-poverty strategy, we hope that they will include cities in their design, but also in the implementation and the monitoring of the strategy. Let's hope for that. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and your experience. And let's hope for cities to have a role in this.
Thank you very much.